It's a Halloween special on Sports Talk Philadelphia. We're going to discuss a pretty scary performance by the Philadelphia Eagles this past Sunday. The Sixers, they're off not to a good start either. And the Flyers is first thing good we can talk about on this episode. All that coming to you on Sports Talk Philadelphia. Hello and welcome to Sports Talk Philadelphia. I'm your host, Cale Flieger. I'm joined by my co-producer, Aiden Tiksinski, for another week. Aiden, how are you doing?
Doing well considering how everything's going in the sports world.
I agree with that. We have Tyler Small back for another episode. Tyler?
Same as what Aiden said practically, but doing well.
And we have Mike Holden back for another episode. Mike?
Doing well too.
Well, as always, we're going to start with the Philadelphia Eagles first, as they were defeated by the Las Vegas Raiders 33-22 this past Sunday in what was another ugly performance by the Eagles, and now they fall to 2-5 on the season. Jalen Hurts, 236 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Most of those numbers coming in garbage time when the defense is playing back. Not impressive. Miles Sanders, though, 6 carries, 30 yards. 5 of those carries on the first drive of the game, but sadly suffered an ankle injury and was out for 3 total quarters of the game. Dallas Goedert also had 3 catches for 70 yards. An impressive performance for him as tight end 1 with Zach Ertz gone now. But it was another offensive struggle again for the Philadelphia Eagles. On the first drive of the game, they marched 75 yards down the field in 8 plays, 5 of them being runs under the center, and it finally worked. But it seemed like after that, the Eagles' just offense couldn't get it going, Aiden.
Yeah, unfortunately, it just looked like after Sanders got hurt, they really ran out of gas. And honestly, it's surprising they ran the ball that much with Sanders to begin with, because if you look at it, the week before, they only ran the ball 9 times with the running backs against the Buccaneers, every single time with Miles Sanders. Then they give him the ball all the way through until he gets hurt with his 6 carries. But besides that, the offense just looked horrible between the fourth quarter and the first drive. It looked like we didn't really even have an offense on the field. And honestly, it would have been maybe even better if the offense didn't show up to play at all. The other thing, too, I know that I've been harping on how well this team has heart in the fourth quarter. At this point, I don't even think it's heart. I think the other team just gives up and lets us score 15 points every time in the fourth quarter because we're getting blown out so much. And as a fan, that's really disappointing.
Yeah, that's what people got to realize. These scores the past couple of weeks, they aren't really blowouts besides the Dallas Cowboys game you look at, but they're really blowouts in the whole game because the Eagles were trailing this game 30-7 heading into the fourth quarter. 2 touchdowns coming in the fourth quarter in garbage time, so that's just not going to cut it for Philadelphia Eagles fans. Another stat heading into this past Sunday, the Raiders' run offense was ranked 29th in the NFL, 80 rush yards per game. It's pretty much around 3.5 yards per carry. The Eagles' overrated and overhyped defensive line allowed the Raiders 120 rushing yards, even with their star running back Josh Jacobs out for the entire second half with a chest injury. But Kenyon Drake, who has been bouncing around teams the past couple years, destroyed the Eagles pretty much. I mean, 14 carries, 69 yards, and a touchdown there. Over the entire season now, the Eagles have allowed 932 rushing yards through 7 weeks of this NFL season, as long as only according 11 sacks, and that is the first time that has happened in franchise history. Tyler, how overrated is this Eagles defensive line this year?
I think you almost have to look back to the offense and them being the reason as to why that is the problem. Because if you look at these games, not only in all games but one have they lost the possession time battle, but in all but 2 games, they've only had a third of the time that the opposers had. And that's because you're not running the ball at all. And I'm very interested to see, sometimes when the season ends, you look back and you see Miles Sanders was banged up the entire year, for example. I hope that's not the case, and I'm not saying that I know anything, obviously, because I'm a little Sal student, obviously. I don't have any insight. But just the factor being, I wonder if there is another reason as to why they're just not running the ball. The defense is always going to get slashed, obviously, when you have these lapses, and when we get into it in a little bit, the inability to get to the quarterback and cause pressure, which gives Derek Carr 90% from the field. But it also comes down to the fact that they are on the field so much and that they're just gassed by the end of it. And it's just the problem that comes when you have these minuscule drives that don't even tap into the clock, because even though you have a mobile quarterback and you have a top-tier running back, I would consider in Miles Sanders when he is healthy, but the inability to actually milk the clock and move down the field, after the first drive of scripted plays.
Yeah, Eagles franchise in a total of 1,285 games have only allowed five quarterbacks to complete 80% of their passes in a game. During the Eagles' past 5 games, they've allowed 4 quarterbacks to reach that 80% completion mark rating. And most recently, that is coming from Raiders quarterback Derek Carr, who completed 31 of 34 passes for about 91% completion rating. I mean, that is just awful numbers. You cannot be allowing a quarterback to be completing that amount of passes in a game. I mean, that just opens up the whole offense when a quarterback is just sitting back there with no pressure given to him, completing passes like that. So, Mike, I want to go to you. How frustrating has Jonathan Gannon's defensive scheme been? I mean, Fletcher Cox called him out this past game saying that it's been over his past 11 years he's played so aggressive, but recently he's just got to play what's being called and not be as aggressive and play back. Do you think that Jonathan Gannon has to change his scheme for the upcoming weeks to change this thing around?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure. I mean, the past couple years with Jim Schwartz, he kind of played that bend but don't break defense, but he knew when to be aggressive and he knew when to blitz. But with Gannon, you just don't see that at all, and he just is not aggressive at all, and it just seems like he's scared calling those plays. And he doesn't want to get beat by the deep ball. And when you're going against like Henry Ruggs, that's fair, but you got to be aggressive. You can't have Darius Slay playing 10 yards off the line of scrimmage, And it doesn't help when the D-line's not getting any pressure either, and it just opens up everything for Derek Carr to have the 92% completion rating. So, yeah, I mean, I think any criticism that he's getting is definitely warranted, and hopefully he can change. But I really don't have much confidence, and we'll see what happens, and we'll see if he's here next year or even the rest of the season.
Now, Aiden, a lot of fans did like Fletcher Cox's comments because, like I said earlier, the defense has only produced 11 sacks through 7 weeks of the season so far, and those are not really good numbers for a defensive line where you gave Josh Sweat a new big contract. Fletcher Cox has a big contract. Javon Hargrave, Derek Barnett, a 14th overall pick for the Eagles. So a lot of players that just aren't living up to their potential. Do you think it's more of a defensive line underperforming problem, or do you really think that it's Jonathan Gannon's defensive scheme not allowing these players to play to their full potential?
Yeah, I really think it's a mixture of both. First, I'm going to go back to Fletcher Cox because I don't really think he has any ground to call anyone out when literally minutes after he said that in the same press conference, he then says that he's not paid to cover screens. I'm sorry, he's a defensive lineman in the NFL. Your job is to try to stop the ball from going forward at any point in the game. So he really, for me, he does not have any standing to call anyone out. Going back to Gannon, though, his defensive play calling is so vanilla. I mean, the linebackers are sitting back in pass coverage, not running up to sack anyone. The quarterbacks are having way too much time because there's no pressure from these linebackers. And honestly, we haven't drafted enough linebackers for them to cover anyone to begin with. So it's really just flaws from the entire organizational standpoint. It's not one person, it's not one coach. It's the entire organization has failed the Philadelphia Eagles and their fans.
That is a very good point. And after talking about this frustrating Raiders game, we're going to head into the NFC standings, which is pretty ugly for the Eagles currently, as you have the Dallas Cowboys leading the division at 5-1, who seems like they're going to run away with this division this year. You have the Washington football team, the Eagles, and the New York Giants all tied for 2-5. I mean, just ugly football so far from the NFC East, besides the Cowboys, who do look like a very contending team this year when they are healthy. So, Tyler, I want to go to you. It's pretty obvious that the Cowboys have the reins of this division, right?
Yeah, they're firing on all assets, and they've been able to from week 1 to today. And there's still plenty of season to be played out, obviously, but this Cowboys team has it locked up. But as I look, when we're going to go to now, it's kind of just the factor of how are we going to utilize the first-round picks. And the fact that you're looking at that already week 7 in to the future of next season is kind of where we, outside of Philadelphia fans, realize that they would probably be at this point of the season.
Yeah, talking about those first-round picks, the Eagles do have 3 potential first-round picks in this upcoming draft. They do have the Miami Dolphins pick that is unprotected, so no matter what happens in their season, we do get their pick. They're currently at number 2 overall in the NFL draft. The Eagles themselves have the first-round pick at number 6 overall, and we also have the Indianapolis Colts pick from the Carson Wentz trade. So if he plays 75% of his snaps, we will also get that first-round pick, and that currently sits at 13 overall. Mike, should fans start to think towards next year with these 3 first-round picks? I mean, that's kind of unheard of to have that high of draft picks, multiple of them to start the draft.
Yeah, I mean, it's at least one thing we can look forward to, but at the same time, you got to remember who's making these picks. It's Howie Roseman for right now, at least, and we know the success he's had in past recent years with his draft picks. And, this draft's definitely a defensive-heavy draft, and, that's a good thing because we need defense. And, I think we got to go, linebacker, corner, safety. There's some good guys there. Derek Stingley from LSU, Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame. And, it also depends. You could go QB, but there's really nobody, who's standing out this year. And you kind of just have to see, give Hurst the rest of the year, see, if he's the franchise. And, we'll see what happens with that. But like I said, there's really nobody big QB-wise. So right now I'll go all defense in that first round.
Yeah, Tyler, just like Mike said, there isn't really any quarterbacks in this draft class that stand out like we did last year, and Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields and Mac Jones and quarterbacks like that. Do you think that the Eagles will proceed with Jalen Hurts being their starting quarterback next season, or do you think that some way they're going to use these 3 first-round picks to either trade for a quarterback, maybe like Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson, even though that seems out of the picture, or do you think they're going to use one of those 3 top draft picks to draft someone young and restart this franchise again?
Yeah, you would think with 3 first-rounders, especially being in the top half of the draft, would give them a lot to put in a trade package. And obviously the ability to do that, because it kind of depends where your head's at. I mean, you can go out and get 3 studs in this defensive front because this is a very defense-heavy draft coming up, so it was a good point. But I think if they were to trade away, I don't think anyone would bat an eye. I think still, though, it all comes back to what next year's plan is. And Jalen Hurts, I think, will be taking snaps for the Eagles next year, but he's not the guy of the future, and that's kind of okay. They don't necessarily need him to be. The fact that he was a second-rounder gives him the ability just to be a transitional quarterback to kind of build around him and then find that quarterback to be put in place, essentially. The Patriots were able to do that with Mac Jones, and now he looks great right now because they found the right person to fill him in. So I think just the ability to take those draft picks and have Jalen Hurts be the guy for now. There's no quarterbacks to get anyway.
Yeah, the Eagles do go on to face the Detroit Lions, who are 0-7 this season in Week 8. The Eagles are favored for the first time this NFL season, so I guess that's a good thing going for the Birds. But, Aiden, what are some key takeaways for this game this upcoming Sunday that the Eagles can get back in the win column and kind of show these fans what they're made of again?
Biggest thing for me, let's just go back to what worked Week 1. We were playing man-to-man defense on wide receivers that we knew we were better than. We had those matchups, and we were able to win with that. We ran the ball 31 times. Let's go back to that system. I could see us pulling out a win if we do that.
All right, and that's all we got for the Eagles this week. Hopefully they get back in the win column against a pretty bad Detroit Lions team. But next we're going to go to Sixers talk, where the Sixers haven't really started the season what fans expected to be. Joel Embiid, the first game, collided knees, and he's already having injury problems. He's been questionable ever since Game 1, and people have been saying, even himself said he's probably around 35 to 55%, which is not what we want Joel Embiid to be at through 4 games of the season. The Sixers are 2-2. They defeated the Pelicans and the Thunder, which are 2 not-so-good teams, and they lost to the Nets and the Knicks, who are 2 teams in the Eastern Conference that are supposed to make a lot of noise this year. So, Aiden, what is your synopsis of the Sixers' first 4 games this season?
So far, what I've taken away is we're going to beat really bad teams, and against really good teams, we're going to struggle against them. And that's a formula for a 500 basketball team, and that's kind of where I think the Sixers are at this point, until they can figure out what they want to do offensively without Ben Simmons being able to pass the ball, and who they need to put into defensive rotation to be able to stop other teams from scoring.
Yeah, the Sixers, they are a good team, but so far through the season it's showing that they do need an all-star caliber player in return for Ben Simmons. And I think it does hurt the Sixers that they have someone that is Ben's talent level sitting on the bench and not putting his game towards helping them win games. So, Tyler, I want to go to you. How important is it for the Sixers to get a player in return for Ben Simmons or to get Ben Simmons back on the court? Because it does seem like the Sixers are missing that one piece still.
I just don't see it happening anytime soon. I think that if Ben Simmons, you feel either way about him and what he's been able to do in his career. But at the end of the day, when you just look at purely win shares, which is more of a way to evaluate him, he's an upper tier guy. He's a top 20 NBA player. And that's just like what's been lost in this translation. So obviously they're not going to get anything of that caliber for him. And I think they're going to take a downgrade. But I think that's kind of okay because the one player we always seem to forget about on this show, Tobias Harris, and he's really been able to step up. He's averaging 20 per game. He's got 9.3 rebounds per game. He's basically been a double-double guy, and this is a guy that we kind of backhandedly gave a max to because we didn't get Jimmy Butler, and he obviously, it's not really selfishness to say the least, but the fact that he was the third best option scoring kind of took that step back to let Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid still lead the team. But he is a fully capable guy. I mean, the numbers that he put up with the Clippers when he was that main catalyst before they had the whole regime change, he has the ability to really put up points. And I think that even if you get somebody that is a step below what Ben Simmons is and what he could bring to you offensively and defensively, like Aiden pointed out, I think just leading it through Tobias Harris and then Joel Embiid when he comes back, who, as we know, could put up MVP numbers, I think they'll still be able to be a little bit higher than 500.
Yeah, Daryl Morey about a week ago did say on 97.5 The Fanatic that this Ben Simmons drama could go on for the rest of the 4 years of his contract, which is not what any Sixers fan wanted to hear. Daryl Morey also said that the Sixers, they aren't going to trade Ben Simmons for 2 players, 3 players that are just role players on the team coming off the bench. They do want an all-star caliber player in return. And Ben said recently that he's not mentally ready to rejoin the Sixers and also that he's had a back issue. Mike, I want to go to you. Do you think that Ben Simmons is going to return on the court soon, or do you think this is going to thing that's going to drag out until he's traded?
Yeah, I don't see this playing out anytime soon. I think, at least until December or even until next year. I mean, with Ben, I understand, I'm all for, taking, a mental health break, and, I'm all for that. We saw Lane Johnson do that, for a couple weeks with the Eagles, but it seems like he's doing this now after, we were fining him and taking away money, and, and now he's got this back tightness. So, yeah, I don't really buy it that much, but, I respect it, but I don't see it playing out. I hope if we're not going to trade him, I hope he can at least play, because we are a good regular season team with him. We were the first seed last year, so I want him to play, but I do still want him to be traded. But if he's not going to be traded anytime soon, might as well get him up there playing. But I don't see a trade or any of that playing out until December. Like I said, probably next year.
Yeah, the Sixers have had a few players step up through the first 4 games of the season. Like Tyler said earlier, Tobias Harris averaging near a double-double, 20 points per game and 9.5 rebounds per game. But you also have Seth Curry, who showed his shooting skills in the playoffs last year. He had 23 points in the first quarter versus the Thunder. He's averaging 16.3 points per game so far through 4 games this season. And the only person to score more points in one quarter than him is his own brother, Steph Curry, who scored 24 points in the first quarter of one of his regular season games. And we'll go to you. Who's been that player that's really stepped up for you so far through the first 4 games of this season?
Yeah, it really has been a mixture between Tobias Harris and Steph Curry. Or Seth Curry, my bad. Either one of them have really just taken control, especially because Embiid has been hurt. And again, the issue with Embiid is he probably should have gotten surgery in the offseason for that meniscus tear, decided he'd be okay not to, and he's already not looking great. And as you said, he's been questionable in every single game. So I'm really starting to think that somebody else is going to have to step up. Obviously, Curry and Harris have, but against the Knicks, Curry only scored 4 points. So clearly that system will work in some games, but I feel like against good teams, everyone, at least 2 to 3 players, if not the entire team, will have to step up to beat those teams that are very, very good.
The bench has also not looked too bad at all. You have Furkan Korkmaz running kind of that point guard role right now off the bench since Ben Simmons is not in the lineup, and you have Tyrese Maxey now shifted to the offensive starting lineup. So you have Furkan Korkmaz, you have Matisse Thybulle coming off the bench. Mike, I want to go to you. How impressive, or do you think the Sixers bench has been impressive through this first 4 games?
Yeah, I think it has. It's last year, they had a good bench last year. You lose Dwight Howard, and but this year I think Drummond is a huge pickup for us. We got him for cheap too, and he might not be. He's still 28 years old, and he's a good backup center for Embiid, which we're going to need. And a pickup like Gorgeous Nang, he's been good too, and then Korkmaz, can shoot. So I think the bench, is good. I wouldn't mind, like we always do, picking up someone at the deadline. But for right now, it's a bench that's. When you have a guy like Matisse Thybulle coming off for defense, it's a bench that's definitely you can deal with. So I am impressed, but it could definitely be better. But right now, I'm happy with where it's at.
Tyrese Maxey has also had an impressive start to the season. His first time starting after being the first-round pick last year. Tyler, how impressive has Tyrese Maxey been through the start of the season?
I mean, 14 points per game at a point guard position doesn't lie. He obviously doesn't bring the assisting aspects that Ben Simmons obviously would, but just to have a scoring threat there that can kind of pair well with Curry is huge.
And that's all we have on the Sixers for this week. They look to bounce back and win a few games over this next week, and we'll be back with you guys next week about them. Next, we're going to go to the Philadelphia Flyers, who have also started their season very well. They are now 3-1-1 on this season. They're looking pretty good. I mean, they had Cam Atkinson, who has 6 goals now in the season, leading the Flyers. That was a big acquisition for them over this offseason. So the Flyers, they're just looking overall pretty decent, Aiden.
Yeah, no, the win last night against the Oilers was huge. 5-3 over a team that was undefeated. It would have been nice to get that win over the Canucks, but it did go into overtime, so we still get the point there. The East this year has been super competitive, so picking up these early wins is massive. And as you said, those free agents that we've gotten, Ryan Ellis, Cam Atkinson, both of them have been very clutch for us. So the Flyers really figured out what their needs were, and were able to figure out which guys would fill in for that.
Yeah, the Philadelphia Flyers did address a lot of needs over this past offseason, but Tyler, what is something that you've seen that the Flyers need to improve on through the first stretch of games they've had this season?
It's the ability to capitalize on power plays. I think that their percentages, obviously, and it's a small sample size, only 4 games in, so you can't really necessarily benefit just off of that. But just from the eye test so far, they really haven't been able to really build up any offense on this front of just not breakout potential. I mean, Atkinson, for example, we've talked about how good he is with 6 goals already. Most of those have come on breaks and mistakes made from the opposing side. But when you have a 5-on-4 or even 5-on-3 advantage and you're unable to kind of get quality shots on net and redistribute the defense, I think that's going to be their biggest problem to look at throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, the Flyers have had a lot of players step up this season. They've had Captain Claude Giroux, who's had a great start to this beginning of the season. Carter Hart looks good. And also, like we said, new acquisitions. Ryan Ellis and Cam Atkinson look very good as well. Mike, who has been the MVP for the Flyers through the first couple games of the season?
Yeah, I think the easy answer is Cam Atkinson. I mean, he's giving you the scoring that, who we traded him for, Jake Voracek, who in recent years, he just wasn't giving us that scoring. And, picking up Cam Atkinson in that trade for him is definitely huge. And he's, 6 goals, 1 assist through 5 games. He's the first Flyer with that many goals in his first 5 games in his Flyers career since Mike Richards in 2009. So, it's Cam Atkinson, and hopefully he can continue that. I know injuries has kind of been a problem for him. We're seeing that with Ryan Ellis, who we're kind of worrying about, and he's already missing games. But, for right now, it's Cam Atkinson, and hopefully he can keep it up throughout the year.
Well, the Flyers, they have been our one good note of talk on this show so far. So hopefully the Flyers can keep this up and continue talking about how the Flyers can improve this season. Next, we're going to go to Fast 5, and the first question we're going to start with is This Week in Baseball with Tyler Small.
Yeah, it's almost the end of the road. Of course, we're in the World Series, and for Philly fans, it's obviously not a good matchup for them. We've got the Braves representing the National League and the Astros in the American League. And although the world is kind of backing the Braves, and that's tough for Phillies to do, I think that they should follow. But I also think that just for pure baseball fans, it hasn't been a great first 2 games, but I think the series is going to heat up, and there's a ton of cool storylines to follow. So Brian Snicker, for the example, manager for the Braves, he's been in the system for 44 years. This is his first shot at the major league level, obviously. He came up through the ranks, and not many managers do that in baseball that start in the minors and come all the way up. Dusty Baker on the other side, one of the most beloved characters in baseball, getting his chance for his first ring with the Astros. And he's best friends with Hank Aaron, who unfortunately passed away this year. He's trying to honor him this year with this title, but he's playing against Hank Aaron's team, so we'll see who big old Aaron sides with.
The next question we're going to move to, Aiden, we're going to go to you for this one. Who is the best NFL team through the first 7 weeks of this season?
Yeah, I'm still thinking it's the Arizona Cardinals. At this point, they're still undefeated. So we're going to see if they can continue that streak. Obviously, they play in a very tough NFC West division with the Seahawks. They're also 6-1. The Rams are up there as well. So clearly, it's going to be a struggle for them to finish out undefeated. I don't think they will. But I think at this point, they're still finding ways to win games, and that's something that's really hard to do in the NFL. If they can continue to do that, I don't see any reason why they can't win the Super Bowl.
And I think it's also put to note that J.J. Watt is out for the rest of the season with a shoulder injury, and Philadelphia Eagles legend Zach Ertz had his first touchdown with his new team, Arizona Cardinals, over this past weekend. So I think everyone's wishing Zach Ertz the best in his new endeavor with the Cardinals. Mike, I want to go to you for this one. We've seen a lot of news over the past week about Deshaun Watson that a trade is right on the edge of going through with the Miami Dolphins. Do you think this trade is going to go through? I mean, that wouldn't be too well for that Eagles first-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the right move for them because I don't think Tua is the answer, and I think they know that. But I think right now, if you're the Dolphins or any team that's got to trade for him, I mean, I think it's just too risky, and you just can't do it yet because you don't. We still haven't heard much about all these allegations, and I'm kind of glad the Eagles are kind of staying out of those talks because Deshaun's a great player, and we know that, but it's just too risky to trade for a guy because you'll probably be giving up at least 2 first-round picks. So, not knowing his kind of future to me kind of sways away. I don't know what the Dolphins are thinking, but I think it's just too risky to pull the trigger on that.
Next, we're going to do Braves versus Astros in the World Series. Aiden, who wins that matchup? It is currently tied 1-1.
Yeah, I'm going Astros, especially after Charlie Morton got hurt. I think the Astros are going to have too much firepower with the Braves, and we'll pull it out.
And our last question for the Fast Five is, who is the best team early in the NBA season? I'm going to answer this one. I'm personally going to go with the Chicago Bulls. I think that they're just a very impressive team in the Eastern Conference right now. They're on the come up. They've had a few big acquisitions this offseason. And Lonzo Ball, who recently had a triple-double for the team, led them with 17 points. We've also had DeMar DeRozan, veteran wingman, who's made his presence felt on that Chicago Bulls roster. And you also have star point guard Zach LaVine, who has been doing his thing. He's averaging around 28 points per game. So he's always a high-volume shooter that on any given night can drop a 30-piece. And you also have Nikolai Vucevic, the center that is a longtime center for the NBA, and he puts up solid numbers. So overall, the Chicago Bulls is a very impressive team so far in the NBA season. I think they're going to be a top 3 seed in that Eastern Conference. That's all we got for you guys on this week's episode of Sports Talk Philadelphia. I want to thank you guys for all joining again. And don't forget to follow us on our social media on Instagram and Twitter at SportsTalkLTV. And that's all we have for you guys this week. We'll see you guys back next week talking more Philly sports.